Amy, welcome.
Yes, hello.
It's good to have you on the Emmaus Project. Um, so, where are you at the moment?
I am currently in the WA Seventh-day Adventist conference office.
Yeah, so
Little,
that's
room, a telephone room they call it.
in your workplace. So, what do you do for the WA conference?
So my technical job description is associate youth director, but I actually only work 1 day a week, so I kind of feel like I don't deserve that name.
Very associate.
Yes. But yeah, I work in the youth department with Willie,
Yeah,
who's the real deal, the real youth director.
the full-time youth director.
Yeah, the full-time one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been doing that for a couple of years now. Before that, what were you doing?
So I had some time off. I was just a mum, like it's not
Just yeah,
just a
just
mum. But I wasn't working at all for a good, just a bit over 12 months,
yeah.
probably 18 months actually. And but before that, chaplaincy. I was
Yep.
chaplain at Lansdale Christian School,
Yep.
where your beautiful boys went for a while there.
Yep.
Um, yeah, do you want me to go back
Yeah,
further?
tell us what and before that you were on Sunny Coast,
Yes.
Queensland. Yep.
Yeah. So
And
on the Sunshine Coast at Noosa Christian College
yep.
before that, and I started off just doing teaching straight out of Avondale there, and then halfway through my time there, switched into chaplaincy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Were you a primary or secondary teacher?
secondary. Yeah.
Secondary. Like what was your subjects?
Yeah, so at Avondale, I had done a major of religion. So I taught, and then I did a minor in history and English. So I did a combo of all of those. And often in Adventist schools, sometimes a little bit of other extra stuff thrown in
Yeah.
there too. But
Depending
mainly,
what need needs to be filled in
yeah.
whatever.
Luckily, I never had to do science or maths or anything completely out of my field.
Yeah.
I mainly taught like studies of religion in year 11 and 12, and then Bible in the junior years, and then some English and history mixed in there as well. So
Yeah, because I think I actually remember I think we had a few classes together at college.
yeah,
It would have been like those maybe Gospels ones or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Gospels and epistles and those
Feels like
kinds of
a long time ago now.
yeah.
But growing up, like
Mm.
dad is a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
so I imagine you moved around like quite a bit. Was there somewhere? Did you anywhere in particular that you would think of that you would have called home growing up, or where were your sort of main places?
Yeah, that's really hard. Yeah, when people say to me like, "Where are you from?" I never know how to answer the
Yeah,
question.
from
I'm like Australia, just around.
the place.
Probably it's between WA and Victoria is what I usually say. Like, so when I was 7, we moved to Geelong in Victoria, and then I did the rest of my primary school years in Geelong.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Melbourne. So we stayed within the state. So that I started high school in Melbourne. So I did a lot of my formative years were in Victoria. So from 7 to 15, I was in Victoria. So in some ways, I feel like,
Kind of Victorian.
yeah, but then I left home from WA. So sometimes, and now that I'm back here and my husband's from WA, like I do feel like a bit of a
Kind of
there. So
and West Australia is kind of a funny place. They'd almost accept you as West Australian, not
yeah,
quite, like because
yeah.
you maybe didn't spend enough time there yet.
I think because I did some schooling there and I'm married to West
Yeah,
Australian, I
that's
think they're like, yeah, you're pretty much one of us.
probably just. And I think
10,
like
11, and 12 there. So I think they kind of accept me. I don't know.
yeah, and it's something like as a East Coaster who spent 5 years in Perth,
Mm.
um, and it's something that like before going to Perth, I really knew nothing about Perth. Like people on the East Coast, like you just know nothing about Perth. Like it's this far off place that you like it's sandy and hot.
Yeah. And
Uh, that,
people think it's like
that's
hot all year round. It's like a desert. It's just hot and sandy.
well that's like when I was in college, I did my I wrote this paper with Sven Ostring,
Oh yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
and we presented it this at Vos Bible Seminary in Perth, and I remember it was in like July or something, or August I think it was, and so I've flown over there to like do this presentation thing
Got
with
in
him,
your shorts.
and like I was like it was freezing, and I was just like, what like this is Perth, like just this shock of how cold it was in Perth. But and I grew to appreciate the cold because it was so hot in summer
Yeah.
when we were there.
Yeah.
So growing up, so dad was a pastor.
Yeah.
You had mum at home.
Yeah.
So obviously they were like really significant people in
Mm.
your sort of life and in your spiritual journey.
Yeah.
But was there anyone else that you can think of growing up? Even like it could be like at high school, or it could be like a friend, or it could be someone older that has played like a significant sort of role
Yeah.
in your sort of spiritual life.
Yeah. Probably Derek McCutcheon, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So Derek McCutcheon, yeah, now I guess he's kind of like my colleague because we're in Western Australia doing ministry. But so he was my school chaplain at Gilson College when I was in Melbourne.
Yeah.
So from 12 to 15, he was my school chaplain, and we were also part of a church plant together
Yeah.
as well, with my family and his
Yeah.
and some others. And then he also did Bible studies with me, and then him and my dad baptized me. So he would be very significant because I think that kind of early teen years are pretty formative, I think spiritually as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, definitely Derek. And just, I love doing Bible studies with him. He just really made the word come alive. And one of the key things I remember specifically is really opened my eyes up to prayer not being like a one-way communication. Like I remember him actually like talking about how listening to God, and I was like, whoa, like we can actually hear from God. Like that was like mind-blowing. But yeah, just really kind of made things come alive. And yeah, spiritually, I really look up to him. And when I came back to WA, all those years later, he was working here. So it's nice to kind of interact with him in a different way now that I'm older, and he was the youth director here as well. So yeah, he's a solid guy and had a big impact on my life spiritually. So now and back then.
That's an interesting like and like people listening to this, like there are probably a lot of them that know Derek from he's done stuff all around Australia in different youth ministry sort of things, was a youth director for a long time, long time. And so one of the things, like I guess we were sort of talking about before, is like youth ministry, people sort of maybe have like a really shallow expectation of kind of what it is, and Derek's probably been one of the, like he creates all these crazy characters and stuff like that he does in his week of prayers, and these really like silly kind of things like on the surface, but he's actually also like a really introverted and really deep thinker. But and also like when you're talking about that stopping and listening to God, like I'm like that really actually sort of makes sense, like with Derek, when you sort of get to know him a bit better and under the surface. So with prayer, I was saying to you before that you're one of the people that, like, when I was thinking about you and this sort of conversation, what some of the qualities that I really think that people could learn from with you, and prayer was one of them. And so it's cool that, like Derek played like a cool, an important part in that. Because I
Yeah.
think prayer, people sort of think like you should just be able to do it. And while I think there's like a natural kind of part to it in some sense, I also think like it's also something you need to learn, like in discipleship, and
Yeah.
it's a practice kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what's been your experience with that, and
Mm.
what, you know, what makes prayer special to you?
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think it's something that you do grow in, and I think it's working out what works for you. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, prayer, you can think, oh, prayer is just prayer,
Yeah.
but I think different styles of prayer work for different people. Like, I'm actually a huge prayer journaler, whereas I know that that would be like someone's worst nightmare, but they
Yeah.
could still have a really positive, exciting prayer life,
Yeah.
but it could look completely different to mine. So I think it's just experimenting with what works for you. Like, for me,
Mm.
I like being able to express myself in writing. And I often found when I was younger, if I would do things that, pray before bedtime or, those kind of traditional things, I'd
Yeah.
fall asleep halfway through, or I'd start thinking about something in my day. Whereas for me, writing focuses me and I'm less likely to go off in tangents. And I try and stop while I'm writing and just, God, speak, speak to me as well. And then I often just like write what comes to me as well. And just, it's often a way for me to process any hurt or pain. And what I've read in the Bible, I find that it helps me process that as I write about it. So for me, that's been really important. And I love particularly also that it's documented. And so when it comes to prayer requests, so often sometimes I know that I've missed the hand of God in things, but when I go back and read, I'll be like, oh my goodness, like he did actually come through in this, and I have seen his providence and his leading. But I think because I've got it documented, I can see it more clearly. So it really works for me. And it'd be something like other people, I suggest it to them, but I say, you know what, this may not be your avenue of your prayer
Yeah.
life, and that's okay. But for me, this works, and this is why. But yeah, I think it's just about finding what works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, prayer
I,
journaling definitely for me, I love. Yeah.
yeah. No, like a couple of like you brought out some really really good points there. So like one of them was you talked about like how writing it down like lets you reflect on like the answers and things that you've seen God doing in your life. And I
Mm,
think that's a really important aspect. And even if you're not necessarily like a big journaler or something, finding some way to do that, because there's one of my favorite stories in scripture is when Samuel, like God does this miracle and saves all of Israel from the Philistines, and Samuel takes these big rocks and he puts them next to
mm,
the road and he calls the rocks Ebenezer, and he says to Israel, he's like, every time you walk past these rocks, like you got to remember what
yeah,
God has done for us today.
yeah,
And so like he's set up like this literal altar kind of
yeah,
thing, so that and it was like in this really prominent place, so that when they came past, they would remember.
yeah. It's a documentation, a visual documentation of God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it would also became like it would become like a discipleship thing where you might be walking past with your family and you could tell them the story of what happened like when you were there, and it would go through like live through generations, right?
mm,
And we see like that's what communion is, like it's that tangible reminder of what God has done for us.
yeah,
The second thing is like the writing down. I'm not like a great journaler sort of thing, in the
mm,
sense of writing long flowing kind of things.
yeah,
um you know putting paragraphs together, emails, like takes me forever. I'm terrible at doing it. But the but what I do like doing is because there's definite value I see in journaling. I
mm,
do like dot point sort of
yeah,
things. But when it comes to scripture, I'll actually write it out. So even verbatim, like I'll write out what the text
mhm,
says.
Yeah.
because I find that writing it out, there's something that happens like with your brain by writing it out, that you'll see different things, and you'll see, it's almost like seeing it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
I reckon it kind of goes deeper into your mind too, because not only are you thinking it, you're writing it, and then you see it again as you're reading it. Like it kind of just ingrains it deeper, I think.
Yeah, I don't know what the scientific thing is behind it, but there's definitely something where I find like that I'll notice things that I won't have noticed, even if I've read through it like a couple of times, that when I write it, I'll be like, oh, whoa.
Yeah, jumps out
something there. So I definitely encourage people to do that, even if like it's just a verse, just write the verse out. Yeah, that's cool. And how did you come to find that was something that sort of works for you with that? Was it just trying different things, or was there?
I think I had heard of other people that had done the same, like sharing their experience. And it was probably it was during my college time that I started journaling. I think because with college, I absolutely loved it, and living in the dorms, like it was awesome. It was social. There was so much to do, and there is a lot of spiritual things that are around. But I actually found my own personal devotional time weakened, only because there's so much to do all the time, that actually having that time just to sit with yourself, with God, and spend some quality time with him, even though I was doing a lot of cool stuff. So for me, it was during that time period where I was like, I need to find something that works for me, because I'm being distracted, and they're not bad things that I'm distracted by.
Well, and like it's if you're living in the dorms, like it's so easy to be distracted, right? Like you can just knock on your next door
people
neighbor.
just come into your room at any time, any hour, literally.
But like even I think today, like we have, like it's just so easy to be distracted. Whether it's like Netflix, or there's always something, your phone, or kids, like you've got your 3 boys now, which we'll sort of get to soon. But like I think like the importance of trying to carve out that time. And to be perfectly honest, like I definitely go through seasons where I'm good at it, and seasons where I'm really bad at it. And I think it's really hard to restart the habit, but like, so it's sort of just to try and keep pressing forward with it.
On that, like I'm actually only starting to get back into, I had a little bit of a break. I have an 8-month-old baby, and so during the time periods of having a newborn, that was something that went, I didn't have the time to sit down with pen and paper and journal. So my devotional time was bits and pieces here and there where I could grab time. And so now that he's a bit older, sleeping a little bit better, it's something that I'm getting back into. But it doesn't flow as easily anymore, but it's starting to. But once again, it's getting back into the rhythm and the routine, and I'm loving doing that. But I think if you kind of jump off the bandwagon, get back into it, it will flow again. It's just sometimes it takes time.
There's this saying, and I'm going to butcher it because I've just sort of gone blank, but it's like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Like when you sort of feel like, I can't spend half an hour or 15 minutes, or I don't have everything sorted or whatever. It's like, well, do something. Like, don't let, because you can't do something perfectly or whatever, stop you from doing something. Because doing something is always better than not doing something, not doing anything. So we sort of covered, you went to Sunny Coast. How did you come about teaching, is definitely a ministry.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
like I've spent enough time in schools and and that kind of thing to know that like
Mm.
it's a difficult job. You really have to be a good teacher. You really have to be invested and
Definitely.
um, caring about the students and caring about the whole person of the student. Um, and you can and like there's so many people that will have teachers that will change their lives, like you know,
Yeah.
in different ways.
Mm.
And so you have like it's such an important role. So how did was it sort of just something that happened like with you sort of transition to from teaching ministry to chaplaincy, sort of church
Youth
ministry?
ministry.
Or
Yeah.
was there like some, did you
Mm.
feel, you know, what was the catalyst for that?
Yeah. So when I it starts actually back when I was in year 12, and obviously like most year 12 students going, what's my calling,
Mm,
what what's ahead. um, and I'd actually gone on a mission trip in my year 12 year, and just God just really pressed on my heart that he had called me to ministry. Like it was very clear coming back from that. But I wrestled with the next 6 months of year 12, just going, what does that ministry look like? And
mm,
I ended up taking a gap year for a few reasons, but one of the reasons was just to grapple with what I was supposed to do. And to be honest with you, I did feel very called to ministry,
mm,
but and initially chaplaincy ministry.
yeah,
And so I called up Avondale and just said, this is what I would like to be able to do. What are my options? Because at that point, they didn't have chaplaincy as a course. Like you
no,
couldn't do chaplaincy.
no,
And so they said there's basically two ways to do it. One, you do theology,
yeah,
the normal
yeah,
ministry and theology
pastoral
degree.
ministry, yeah,
Yep. Or you could do teaching and major in religion, and then possibly you could get in that way. But both of it was like possibly you could get in either
yeah,
way, but it would just depend. So to be honest, at that time, I was 19-year-old girl, obviously, and I was freaked out by the idea of doing ministry, because even now it's a lot more, like there's more
open.
and more women coming into ministry all the time. But even going back, I don't know how many years ago were we
Uh,
at college
so
at the
almost 10 years, yeah,
yeah, so we like graduated almost 10 whatever, at
yeah,
least 10 years ago. Even then I was just like, that's really scary. I don't want to do ministry. Like
yeah,
I was a bit of a in some regards I think I was a little bit of a Jonah of like, I don't want to do that, that is way too scary, I'm not choosing that.
mm,
So I chose the do teaching and do a major in religion. But to be honest, in all of that process, God grew me a lot through that,
yeah,
because going through the teaching degree, I actually grew in my confidence. I grew in my confidence in being able to present in front of people. I grew in my confidence spiritually and in my faith. And going through the pracs and then going into teaching, I think I needed to take that step. I think he had a lot of growth in me that he wanted to do in that. And through that, I developed a love for particularly teens and journeying with them. And
mm,
because I was teaching Bible when I graduated and was teaching at Noosa, it just lended itself to ministry within the school anyway. Like
yeah,
when kids were really interested in my Bible classes, then I was able to extend that to like Bible studies outside of that.
yeah,
And it was, to me, it was like a massive ministry in itself. And
sure,
I absolutely loved it. Like church, my classroom was church, you know, like it was not traditional, it was out of the box. But and then over time, I suppose, I guess my principal realised, he saw that.
was that Ross?
It was Ross to begin with.
Yeah,
Ross was the principal at the start, and then it was David Rogers.
okay,
You know, yeah.
I don't know David, I know Ross, yeah,
Yeah, Ross is awesome.
yeah,
Yeah. So then they just, they asked me, like, we can see this ministry within your teaching, and we would love you to see, like, what do you think? Like, would you be interested in having a go? And it was like, almost like God brought me full circle. I was like, oh my goodness, I remember that that's what I felt like he had called me from the very beginning. So God has a funny way sometimes of putting you back on the path that he called you to. And sometimes you just need to have some stepping stones that are going to grow you to get you to that point. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was kind of like the course that got me there.
Yeah. And like, you think about like that could have been the way that God wanted anyway. Like, because like you sort of said at the start was, well, you could have gone down the pastoral ministry kind of track. Like, there's only X amount of chaplaincy jobs like in the country that it only like really like a small percentage of all pastoral jobs. So the chance that you would get a chaplaincy job,
And then I would have probably had to do a pastoring job
you would,
straight off.
yeah. And but also, like, I think there's some things that they do with teaching that really like should be part of the pastoral course, like learning how to teach in that sort of that you could take your Bible lessons and make them engaging for the kids,
interactive. And
yeah.
I was actually talking to Ray about this. I know you
Yeah.
interviewed him a few
Yeah.
weeks ago.
Yeah.
He was saying to me that, like, the stuff that he learned, because he's done both,
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff that he learned during his educational degree has actually given him a lot of skills that is so important in ministry that he didn't learn just doing the theology side of it. So
Look, that would definitely be, I I have no say in these things, but I would definitely encourage, like, there's definite things that I would take and introduce into our pastoral course.
yeah.
So with that, so you said teens has been like a special kind of passion for you. How is that sort of, I guess, like, it makes sense now that you're working in youth department, you're doing chaplaincy. What is it about working with teens that you're particularly passionate about?
The teens is such a crazy time in life. Like, it's all about identity. Being a teen is always just trying to work out where you belong, where you fit, what you believe. All of a sudden, everything's questioned and it's tipped on its head. It's a pretty scary time in life. And sometimes I think adults, we can freak out by that. And it is a bit scary because they do question and they do push the boundaries. But the whole purpose is trying to work out who they are and where they fit, where they belong, and what they believe. And I think if they don't have those people in their life, those mentors, that's where they fall away. That's where they will find their identity and their purpose in belonging outside of Jesus and outside of the church. If they don't have people that are going to nurture that within it, or within school or whatever environment that you're in. And so it's a huge challenge, but sometimes just getting on their level and just really having those chats of what is life really like for you at the moment. And they are going through a lot of stuff. Like, they are. Like, I thought I went through a lot of stuff when I was a teenager, but the stuff that they go through now is even harder to process. And sometimes they just need somebody that's not within that age group to listen.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just listening. And then you can, once I think you've earned that respect by listening, they're not often willing to hear what you have to say, and maybe speak some wisdom into that. Like, what did you learn when you were a teenager? How did you process that? So I really believe that true identity is found in Jesus, and they will get that true identity in Jesus, but they need people to support them in seeing that. If we shy away from it and get scared, then they got to find the identity somewhere else.
I think it's one of the things, like, I love about teen ministry is that we can see, like, from the other side, I guess, of like teenage life, that, you know, we all go through like this it's this really intense, you know, kind of time, like everything feels like so full on, and
Yeah.
you know, emotional, and you know,
Everything's
like,
a drama. Yeah.
yeah, like, you know, I definitely went through some really uh, dark things as well, like even as a teenager. But the um, like, I think for adults, it's sort of, we need to, yeah, be patient with them in that, and going, like, we know that it's really, like, it's kind of ridiculous on the far side of it, but like it's real for them, and to sort of walk in that reality with them, and to
Yeah.
and like, really, like, I'm sure, like, it's the same for God, like looking at us, just going, dude,
We're
like,
his rebel teenagers.
that's so ridiculous, like what you're going through, like that feeling that you're feeling at the moment, like you're upset about this thing, is so silly,
But
but
if it's
but he
important to
still
you, it's important to me.
but he still chooses to, like, walk, like, he doesn't just walk off, he
Yeah.
still chooses to be there with us, and present with us.
Mm.
And I think that um you know, with my churches, and particularly this last few years, like, I've really been encouraging them to see young people and children as their first mission,
Yeah.
that God has called you. Like, we like to talk about mission, and we like to give money to in the Sabbath school offerings and different things, like, for missions over here. But, you know, you live in a mission field. Your community is a mission field,
Mhm.
and you don't even know their name, and, like,
Right
so,
under your nose. Yeah.
you know, so, yeah, look after your first responsibilities first.
Yeah.
But one of the things where we got to know each other, well, or got to know each other and work together
Mm.
with, was in teen ministry.
Yes.
And part of that was through the youth, the big camp for
Yeah.
teens. And I think it must have been our first year, or your first year there,
Yeah,
because,
I think so. Yeah, first or second. Yep.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so it was my second year running it, because you weren't there for Dayan's year. I think you were there the second
Yeah.
time around, which was JP, who's now
Yeah.
a chaplain up here in Brisbane,
Yeah.
and doing, like, really crazy, amazing things in chaplaincy.
Mm.
But I remember, so for the people that listened last week, I sort of brought up the teens and the teen shed a little bit, about how we, having Dayan come, really sort of helped shift the direction and focus on teens to be a lot more intentionally spiritual focused, and have higher expectations of their spirituality, and that kind of thing. And we definitely saw the fruit of that over a few years. And that first year in particular, I sort of alluded to it in Dayan's one, that we had a bit of a story to share. Like, I always sort of tell people, half jokingly, oh, it was the miracle in the teen shed. But what's your recollection of that?
Yeah. Well, we so it was Sabbath morning,
Mm.
and you want me to retell the story? Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
yeah, well,
Like,
like, because I guess, like, to some extent, because we were sort of joking a bit beforehand about how we both sort of cynical people,
mm,
and where we both sort of like go, did that really happen like that? Or and even though, you know, at the time we knew that it, like, clearly was true, and we worked it all out, there's still that little bit of human cynicism that goes,
yeah.
did we really just experience a miracle?
Yeah. Well, I think we did, Dan. I think we.
Oh, look, I'm sure we did. And like, it was cool because your dad was there, like at the camp, and like it was I remember like you telling him about it, and he like having like a sort of an emotional kind of reaction
Yeah.
really to it. But so yeah, I can essentially tell the story. Was JP had planned to do the story of the loaves and fishes for his Saturday morning program, and it sort of goes up to how the teen shed had been getting like around 125 to 150 kids, and that was sort of like the normal kind of level. And so in the lead up, that's kind of what we prepared for. And I'd sort of worked it out, rough guess. And Easter in Perth, like everything shuts down. So I'd bought like a few loaves of bread because JP wanted to make sure everyone got a piece of bread in giving out this story. We had these big platters. I cut it all up and had it ready on the Friday night. And Friday night, we just had so many kids turn up. Like we had to open up the back door. There was over 200 kids turn up on the Friday night, which was like 50 more than we were expecting on our biggest kind of day. Because I remember like scrambling to try and find chairs from like stealing chairs from all the other divisions and stuff. And
down the sides, all out the back. Yeah.
And because you're so focused on just then, you don't really realize what any kind of issues. But I remember waking up early on Saturday morning and just going, oh no, we don't have enough bread. Because like you could like, you know, it can do basic maths. Like there's this many pieces of bread cut into 4 bits. And I remember at our sort of, like it was just too late to do anything about it.
And it was Sabbath. We can't buy things on Sabbath.
And I remember distinctly in our staff worship, kind of just being at peace like about it, but sort of just like,
let's pray about it.
Yeah, just saying like, let's just pray. And I remember just like in the prayer, just sort of saying, God, I'm sure you find this situation hilarious. Like I'm sure you're laughing at the irony of this situation that we
don't have enough bread.
We don't have enough bread in the story about you producing enough. And so we were just like, it was essentially like there was nothing glamorous about the prayer or anything. It was just like, God,
we know you can do it if you want to do it.
We're just leaving this up to you. And it was sort of just, oh, that's all we can kind of do. And then I just remember like we had the trays, and they went, you know, the time came, they all got passed down, and then they all got passed back. And you can, like, for people that don't know, like at this sort of point in time, it's like 11:30 in the morning. We got teenage boys, and there's some guys are like just grabbing like handfuls of bread like on the way back. And the
teacher was packed again that day, even more than the Friday night. Like,
which is the normal, like Saturday mornings, the busiest. So it's spilled out the back of the shed. I think like there was like 230 odd sort of teens there.
And we had enough bread for what was it? It was like 100.
Like 150-ish.
I think we thought, oh, Sabbath morning, the most we will ever get is 150, wasn't it? Because we're normally getting like 110 during the week.
Yeah, nowhere near like what we had. And then it just went down, came back, and then we ended up like after it had gone through like 2 laps with bread still left over on the tray.
Had some handfuls.
And we were just sort of like looking at each other at one point, and I was just like, what just happened? Like, how did this?
I actually started laughing, like, because it was almost like that shock of like, what has actually just happened? We have leftover bread.
and I can completely understand people listening to this just being like cynical but trust me, like if you know me, like I'm a very cynical person. If somebody will tell me this happened, I'm like, well, maybe it was just this, or maybe it was like, you know, I'm a very rational, logical person. And like that's the only explanation I can come up with. It just makes sense in the journey that we were on in that place. And I remember Terry must have been president
Yeah. Yeah.
then. And I remember sending him an email about like us having a miracle in the teen shed, and I remember telling him that teens is the most spiritual division in camp, and it's you guys, you know. And I think he never replied, because I think he's just like, oh yeah, whatever, as if teens is the most spiritual division.
Terry, are you listening?
But we had this but you know, for me it was just this culmination of lifting the bar of spirituality and expectations, and having God.
They're hungry, they're thirsty, they actually want it, they can go deep, and they want to.
Well, and I think like, because when we do talk about like that they are living in this intense reality, and there is like that real hungering for God's presence.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like one miracle that we got to share in ministry, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool moment.
Yeah, and I still look back, you know, even like on those sort of 3 or 4 years, and go, wow, like of all the things that I've done in ministry and all the different things, like I'm almost most proud of that sort of time, and because of what
hashtag Teen Shed version.
Yeah, and just because of the sort of culture we were able to build in such a short time.
Yeah.
But you in your personal life have had like a bit of experience with your boys, your first boys, Nate and Jai, the twins. So you finished college, you got married, like you got married, was it last year of college or something, right at the end? So you married Scott.
We lived on Avondale Road the last year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we married the last year. Yeah.
And so then go and work for a few years, and part of, you know, a lot of people's journeys of getting married is having kids. But your story was not quite so straightforward.
No, it's hard to know where to start in that journey. But and it's also just disclaimer, when it comes to infertility journey, it's hard to not talk about it without having to get pretty personal with that. Yeah. Hopefully the listeners are okay with that, because you can't really share that without having to share some of that information.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like I guess I just had just female health hormonal issues. I found out that I did in my last year of college, actually had an operation in that last year at college, and had endometriosis and polycystic ovaries. So I found that out in my last year of college. But at that point in time, it didn't really worry me too much, because Scott and I had only just got married, and I was just about to graduate. We're going to move to the Sunshine Coast. Like, having a family was not on our to-do list.
Still in early 20s.
Yeah. I was 23. Like, it wasn't at the top of the list. It was something that we wanted to have a family, but we wanted to enjoy being married and enjoy our careers for a while and all that kind of stuff, and industry. But I guess I kind of waved the health issues a little bit under the mat, didn't really want to confront any of it. Oh, it'll be okay by the time that, you know, we're ready to have a family. Just didn't really want to think about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But as things, like you say, as time goes on, and my doctor actually in my last year of college, my gynecologist had actually said to me, you actually have it fairly severely. So if you are considering having a family, I would recommend that you start trying right away, because it is going to be difficult for you. And like I said, I just brushed that under the carpet, because I was like, no way, like, I'm just married, we're not having kids yet.
Well, I imagine like it's a pretty confronting thing, like being young, being like healthy, you know, like not really having any kind of other sort of health issues or whatever, and you just got this person saying
Yeah.
this thing to you, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of, yeah. And I mean, the reason I had the operation is they actually thought it was that I could have possibly had ovarian cancer. So that's why they did it so quickly. And it wasn't. It was polycystic ovaries and endometriosis, which was a good outcome. So
Yeah.
I was kind of like, oh, it's a good outcome.
Yeah, yeah.
But like in reality, it still creates problems down the track.
Yeah.
So yeah, like as years went on, Scott and I did start to discuss, okay, so we did get told that it could take us a little bit longer, if at all it is possible. So
Yeah.
should we maybe start thinking about it maybe a little bit earlier than we were thinking? So yeah, we did then start, yeah, I guess actively trying to see if we could have a family. And when we did start to do that, because I was on the pill, because the pill masks all those symptoms that you can have with all the hormonal stuff. So I went off it, thinking that we might see if we could start trying to have a family. But yeah, my cycles didn't return at all. And sometimes that's not uncommon for the first 6 months, but they start to get worried after that kind of mark. I didn't have it for years, like years and years. So there was no, we couldn't even try because my whole system just was offline, didn't work. And so in that time period, I did have multiple operations to see if they could get things going, had extra stuff removed. One of the procedures I had a 90% success rate in kickstarting ovulation. Nah, didn't work. So it was just the emotional roller coaster through those years was just really hard. Like I was in the unlucky 10%, like just nothing was working. And we then moved to Perth. So my husband's from Perth, so that's where I went to Perth, did chaplaincy at Lansdowne. It was that time period that I just thought, oh, we've got a fresh start. Because I had started to get a little bit over going from doctor to doctor and different procedures, but I thought, okay, I should maybe start again. We're in a new state, different health system. Like I'll seek out some more health, and I got on a waiting list to see one of Perth's leading fertility specialists. And it took ages. It took me 6 months to be able to see her. And when I finally saw her, I was like so excited because I thought, look, if anyone's going to be able to fix my problems, it's going to be this woman. Like she had a really, well known name and all that kind of stuff. And I had one appointment with her, and that was one appointment. She did an internal examination, and she said basically, I can't help you. Like that. To hear from a leading fertility specialist that I couldn't be helped was she used that awful word infertile. She's like, I can't even put you on an IVF program because you don't have any eggs, you don't have anything like to give. So there was no even alternative approach that we could try. So when I just remember going home from that appointment, like just bawling my eyes out because
it must have been like, I can only imagine it must have just been devastating kind of news.
Oh, it was grief. Like it felt like someone close to me had died. And I know that sounds a bit dramatic, but it actually felt like that because my dreams of being a mum were dead. Of Scott being a father, and then trying to grapple, well, what does my future look like now? Like, I always imagined that I would have a family. And so all of a sudden your dreams are dashed, your reality, like it was really uncertain. Like, I just don't know what's ahead anymore. And everything I ever imagined and thought about my future is no longer. So it was grief in a lot of different ways. And I remember that particular night. Like there'd been a lot of grief throughout the journey, but I think that was the pinnacle. That was where I just it really crushed me.
But it was almost like, well, there's still like a glimmer of hope kind of thing. And then it was just like she just snuffed
Yeah.
snuff
Her
whatever
bedside
light there was.
either, I have to say. She was pretty blunt, and I guess they have to be. They have to speak reality, but it was quite shocking to me to just have that really bluntly just out there.
Mm.
And that night, yeah, I cried myself to sleep, and I remember particularly just praying but also not wanting to at the same time.
Yeah.
And I just said, like, God, I actually don't even know what to pray. I'm like completely heartbroken. I don't know what anything looks like anymore.
Mm.
And I just felt like that very, very clear. I remember it distinctly, just like, Amy, you need to trust me. You are focusing on the wind and the waves right now, and I need you to look at me. And so immediately that brings me back to the story of Peter, right? Like he focused on the wind and the waves, and that's where he sunk. Whereas keeping his eyes on Jesus, that's when he walked on water. And so it brought me, just the words that brought me back to the story. And I remember just praying, like, I don't know what it looks like to keep my eyes on you, and I don't know how I can not look at the wind and the waves, but I know that the alternative is sinking, and I don't want to sink.
Yeah.
So if that means that I have to look at you, I actually don't know what that looks like either, but I think that's the better option. And so it helped me to get through that.
So
And I just went to sleep at that point.
yeah, when you said, sorry to interrupt, when you
Mm,
said like you felt like God saying to you,
mm,
you know, you're focusing on the wind and the waves, like,
mm.
and clearly, like, probably one of the darkest times you've ever felt, like in your life.
Yeah,
So nobody would blame you for focusing on the wind and the waves.
right. Yeah, yeah.
But what, like, what was it? Some, like, just like a feeling you had? Was it like a, you know, like your inner voice sort of saying to you, like when you say, like, you know, oh,
Felt
God is
God.
saying to me
Yeah.
this, what was it like for you in
Yeah,
that?
it was like a real strong inner voice. Like it wasn't an external voice, but it was a very strong, like, because I was just crying and upset.
Oh yeah.
It was something that broke through my consciousness. Like, as in, I was just a mess, couldn't think past anything else. So
Yeah.
when I just muttered that prayer, it was something that just broke through that dullness and that I'm grieving, to something very pointed, like, Amy, I need you to concentrate on me. So a thought, I suppose, that was contrary to what I was thinking and feeling, very outside of myself. Does that kind of
Yeah.
make
Like there's something actually, like, with you saying, like, your prayer was, God, I don't even know what to pray.
sense?
I actually feel like it seems really sort of counterintuitive. But I've had experiences like that with prayer, and where I've just been as well, been like, uh, sort of like you wanting to pray, but there's just nothing coming to mind, kind of thing. And I'll just in the end just say, like, and you know, I was praying for someone at that time,
Yeah.
and it would be, there was just this experience where I said, you know, like, I feel like I should know what I should be praying for, like, you know, whether it's healing or whatever it is. But there
Yeah.
was just like literally nothing coming to my mind, and I said, God, you know, and you know, and it's like, and like, they actually had, like, you know, a really profound answer to prayer in that sort of time with that,
Yeah.
where, like, I think we discount the role of the Holy Spirit in prayer,
Yes.
and we sort of feel like it's, well, I've got to give all this, you know, it's, and
It's
you
got to
go,
come from me.
yeah, yeah, but, like, you know, he knows, and so sometimes just giving it to him and just saying, God, like, you know, like, is just this letting the Holy Spirit kind of step,
Intercede on your behalf.
yeah, step into that moment and go, yep, I do know, and, like, bang, like, here it is.
Yep.
Um,
Exactly.
and so, you know, just to be that encouragement for people that, like, you could be frequently, or you might be at that point where you don't even know what to pray, but
Mm-hmm.
just to be saying, you know, God, like, you just giving him that, you know, like,
I don't even know, but you do.
yeah, I don't even know what I should be praying for right now, or, you know, for whatever the situation is, just letting him. And I think it's almost like giving the Holy Spirit permission to step in and to take over that role.
And I think we need to do that more, definitely.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to. I was just like, oh, that's a really
No, I think that's a really
profound thing.
point. Yeah. So yeah, and I learned so much in this journey about God, and I think that's one of those things. And another one is that comes straight out of that is that supernatural joy, because I actually woke up that morning, like the next morning. So on the way home, my parents were living in Fiji, and I had told my mum about the news that I had just received. So she did have that context. And so that night, after I'd had that experience of like, keep your eyes on me, like I went to sleep, and I woke up, and like life had to continue as normal. And the thing is, because no one has passed away, you can't explain to me, oh, I just need to have some time, like, because no one would understand why you needed that time to grieve. But and I had to go to work as normal, woke up, and but it was the weirdest, crazy thing. I woke up with this weird, crazy, just like joy. It was strange as I was going to school, driving to school that day, all I felt like doing was singing worship songs. Like, it's really strange, right? Circumstance hadn't changed. Like, I still felt crushed, but for some reason I had this unexplainable, I just needed to it was weird as. I couldn't explain it. And so I ended up texting my mum, not while I was driving, texting my mum and just saying, because I knew she would have been quite worried about me. And so I just texted her just saying, I just want you to know that I'm actually woken up feeling really good. Actually, really weirdly, I just feel this unexplainable sense of joy.
Yeah.
She texted me back and said, is it weird that I already know? And I was like, what the?
Yes, Mum. Yes, that is weird.
So she, as I said, she was living in Fiji. My parents were living in Fiji at the time, and they lived on a compound. And so they're 5 hours ahead of Perth in time. So when she woke up that morning, she got all the ladies that lived on the compound. And I'm going to try and say this without crying, but she got all the ladies on the compound to pray for me that morning while I was sleeping, because I was still asleep. They were 5 hours ahead. And as they were praying for me, Mum just she got that sense, she's going to be okay. I am going to give her my joy. That's the sense that she got from the Holy Spirit that morning. And then for her to get that text from me saying, I feel an unexplainable sense of joy, was like, whoa. So the situation had changed. It was so hard. I was grieving, but I think that's what joy is. Beyond circumstance. Joy is something that can happen no matter whether the circumstances are good or actually terrible. Joy comes from the Holy Spirit. And that was a moment where I understood what I heard people say that. And I knew that the Bible, the sense of joy was different than happiness. But to be honest, I'd never actually experienced what that actually looked like. And so for me, that was a real turning point in understanding joy.
Would you describe it like a peace kind of thing, or because like happiness is it's determined about on like your relationship to other people and your circumstances, right? Like, is happiness, and joy is sort of like this higher feeling of something.
It's definitely peace. And I think for me, it was peace, but for what came out of that was a sense that I needed to praise and worship, came out of that sense of joy. So I think joy always filters back to Jesus. Like, it's a response that pours out back to him, I think. I don't know.
Because it's just like, that's really cool. It's making me think of the stories in the New Testament, particularly around some of the disciples that were going through really dark times and difficult times. They might have been imprisoned and thinking that they're about to be executed, kind of thing. Like, not just in prison, And like they start singing praises to God, and like there's this joy. And particularly Paul is sort of someone you think about, after he starts following Jesus, like it feels like it's just one thing after the other, after the other, after the other.
Yeah.
Then like living the majority of the rest of your life in prison, but still, like, he still talks about joy so much, and
be joyful in all circumstances. And I never understood, like, how can you do that? You were in jail, like you had this and this, like how is that possible?
Yeah, like there's almost like this stoic kind of thing where circumstances around you could be really difficult, but there's like a higher way of coping. And like there's good news, like in your story, and like I'm looking forward to talking about the good news with your story. But I also sort of just wanted to stop for a little bit, because there's people that won't have good news, like in their story, and it could be around infertility, or it could be around any other health diagnosis, or it could be around any other situation, like Paul, and even particularly Paul, like I'm thinking like the verses where like he's pleaded with God to remove this thing from him, like he calls like the thorn in his flesh, which we don't know what it was, but obviously something that was causing him like a lot of grief and pain, but yet like he doesn't get respite from that. And so, but yet he still managed to have this joy of the Lord. I don't know, like if you like, I guess I just wanted to sort of encourage people.
Like even on that, like I didn't know that I was going to get a miracle. And there was one really important turning point where the song Christ is Enough for Me, that song. It was a real turning point where Jesus is like, really? Like, am I? If you do not get your miracle, because I've been praying for this for years, right? Just praying and praying and praying. Am I actually enough? Like, and
it's so confronting.
It was, I actually burst into tears at the moment, because I knew I couldn't say, yes, Jesus, you're enough. I couldn't. And I knew it, and I knew he knew it. That's why he asked it,
You just wanted to be honest. Just be honest.
And I was like, oh my goodness, no. And so I had to get to a place in my journey and my faith where I could say, no matter what happens, like whether I never have children, you are enough for me, and I know that your plans are still good for me, and all those promises in your word, they still apply to my life. It just may look different than I had imagined. I have to say, it took me a long time to get there. But and maybe I never fully got there. I'm not saying like I ripped, but being able to say, Jesus, whatever happens, I'm gonna choose to trust you, and I want you to be my enough.
It's kind of like it is really confronting kind of thing to think about, and I can only imagine what that must have been like. But it makes me think of the dialogue with Peter and Jesus, where Jesus like, do you love me? And he's like, yeah, I love you. Like, no, Peter, do you love me? Like, and I don't think Peter actually gets it, like even after the third one. But obviously, because if you look at the Greek and blah blah blah, but but God still, like, it's like he's putting this, no, like, I need you to go higher. I need you to think more, but like he still is with him, even in that space, and even though he doesn't get it, and like his whole ministry is about people not getting what he's about, like while he's on earth. Like I think I don't even know, but it's just it would have been, I would have been super uncomfortable with God asking me that. But it's that level of vulnerability. He's like, I just want you to be honest. It's almost like, you know,
He's
let's
like, I already
let's
know
just be
the
honest.
answer, but I'm still going to ask you.
Yeah. Let's just be honest together and
Yeah.
have an honest conversation about
Yeah.
this.
And I think it just comes down like this side of heaven. It's that tension between the already and the not yet.
Yeah.
Like there is already, like Jesus came to inaugurate his kingdom, and there is evidence of that on this planet and in the journey of Jesus. And why sometimes there is healing, there is all of those things in Jesus, but there is also the not yet, that we're not there yet. And so I don't know why sometimes the answer is yes and sometimes it's not, but it's I think it's the Christian journey is being able to lament with that and it enables us to long for the not yet. Not yet is coming, and I don't know why sometimes it's yes and sometimes it's no, but one day it's going to be yes and only yes, and it gives us a chance to long for that. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because I know that my journey may have not been the yes, and I know that there's very close people for me who have journeyed with similar things, and that it looks different. Their journey is different to mine, and I don't understand why. And I don't think that, I think we should always, you know, be praying for it, but leaving that with God. But I know for me, I had to come to a point where I could say that no matter what happens, that you're enough. And I think whatever journey anyone finds themselves on, it's just about growing in that faith and that trust on this side of heaven, knowing that the not yet is not here yet. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that God was leading you to like a prerequisite for what was to come. Yeah.
I'll reach this point before I'll give you what you,
It was just like, no, for your good, you need to be here. You know, and then that was just something like that he did. But so we keep talking about the good news, and we've mentioned the boys already. So bit of a spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
A miracle happened.
Yeah.
You went from being infertile to becoming pregnant.
Yeah. It was crazy. The key verse that comes from Isaiah, and it talks about waters in a wasteland.
Yeah.
It was that verse in particular. And once again, I didn't 100% know what it meant, and I didn't want to jump to too many conclusions, but it was at the beginning of that particular year that was, I often have a verse of the year. I don't know whether other people do, or a word for the year, or something that I'd like at the beginning of a new year. I'm like, God, I don't know what this year looks like. You did, journey with me. And that was the verse. That was my verse for the year, waters in a wasteland. And it meant like it was also in my ministry. It was all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
But it was that particularly that I felt very impressed that it also meant for that as well. But I didn't 100% know. And I wanted to pray in that way, but I also just wanted to let God do whatever that meant. And so, it did turn out by the end of that year, so the end of 2015, nothing had changed in my body. It was still the same. I didn't get a miracle in terms of like healing, whereas I had always prayed for the healing.
Yeah.
I prayed for the healing so that I would be able to have children. And it didn't happen in that way. I still had all the health problems. It's just that I started, it was in December, started feeling a bit strange. I'm like, weird, like, am I having one of those phantom pregnancies that people, like, I'm like, because I really feel like if people describe what it's like to be like, this is how I would kind of describe it. I'm like, oh my goodness, my mind's playing tricks with me, like I'm one of, but to put my mind at ease, I decided to take a pregnancy test. And I just remember as I did it, I just like, well, rivers in a wasteland, like you just can't put anything past God. So I just decided to do it. And then after that, went to have an ultrasound and discovered that it was not just one baby, it was two. And you know what? No joke, as the lady told me, told Scott and I that it was 2. Do you know what I had written in my ear? Rivers, plural, rivers. I was like, God, did you have to be that literal? I don't know if I can handle this. Like, twins is a bit much.
Yeah. Well, and then like subsequently you've had another son as well.
Yes, I have 3 boys now.
So
Absolutely crazy. Yeah.
understandably very, like, it's just, yeah. Like, and it was cool to actually, like we were still in Perth at the time, and like, you know, we've been talking for ages, so we probably need to wrap up. But like, it wasn't just, oh, then God's giving you a miracle, and oh, everything's
Smooth.
everything's worked out smooth, sort of sailing, and everything's been great. Oh, perfect. Because you
There
know,
was real testing in that too.
you had twins,
Yeah.
but then like your pregnancy journey was, I guess, rocky.
Yeah.
We could say. I don't know what else you would want to describe it as.
Yeah, no, good word.
You know, like, because how, you know, there's sort of like the boys ended up were born really early.
Yeah.
But that was like in the lead up to having like difficulties.
Yeah, I was in hospital for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how preemie were the boys?
28 weeks.
28 weeks.
Yeah.
So,
So 12 weeks preemie.
yeah. So to give people like context for that, like how big were the boys when they were born? Do you remember? Like, because they're pretty small, hey?
Yeah, so Jai was 900 grams, so he didn't even make a kilo.
Yeah.
Tiny as, and Nate was just over a kilo, so he just was in that kilo range. And I know that kind of can sound, oh, well, what does that even look like? But
Yeah.
I've never seen something so small. Like because it ended up having to be an emergency C-section, I wasn't able to see them initially. And so when I was able to go see them, I knew that they were going to be small. Like, there's no other way around it. They're only 20 weeks, but I just didn't know how small. And to be honest, I was actually quite frightened when I saw them. And then I felt so much guilt, like I'm frightened of my own children. Like, there was just so much going on in my head at that time, because at that point their skin is still see-through. Like it's very early.
Well, like, because they essentially missed a whole trimester.
Yeah.
You know,
weeks you head into your last trimester.
Essentially, which is when like all the size stuff happens.
Yeah. Yep, it's crazy. And I had a pregnancy app that, like, you know, each week what's happening. And I actually had to stop reading it because it would upset me, because it'd be like, this week their brain is doing this. I'm like, oh no, they're not in my womb. Is their brain doing that now? Like, it would really upset me, because development happens completely differently after the womb, which is why sometimes they can have a lot of issues growing up, because their development was cut short in the womb. And so but
like I see videos of them on Instagram, and it's 2 pretty rambunctious Turner boys that I'm sure freak you out at several times a day with their antics that they would get up to. I think like it's a good place to sort of wrap it up. I just want to ask you like one question, sort of closing. If you could get everyone that listened to this today to do one thing, what would that one thing be? What's something that's sort of like really
I kind of feel like a little bit of like, it wasn't a planned theme, but something that's kind of come up a bit through this conversation was listening to the voice of God. Because I even mentioned that unintentionally. But I mentioned it when I was doing Bible studies as a teen, like a 12, 13-year-old girl. Where I was challenged with the fact that prayer wasn't just a one-way communication where I just talk and that's it. And I think that for me has been such a huge thing, is learning the voice of God and how to decipher that above everything else. And like we talked about with prayer in itself, it's something that you do grow in.
Mm.
And it, in one of, I don't know what else word, but it takes practice. I don't know what a better word
Yeah.
for that is, but
No, I definitely think that's right.
yeah. So I guess one thing would be just to lean into the voice of God, and to practice what that means in being able to decipher his voice above the chaotic world that we live in, because it's hard to hear in the world that we live in. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, yeah, there's been so much, there's so many valuable things that we've touched on, and that just sort of came out of different parts of your journey, and then our sort of journey, ministering together, and then your miracle babies.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember coming to see you guys in the hospital. And
That was so special. So everybody, these guys came in with a birthday cake with his little boys and Jack, and they came and visited us in hospital. And it was like this double decker, all these
we
colours
made
and
the
layers.
mistake of letting Archie pick
I'm so glad
the
Archie picked that.
well,
And just came in. It was like a happy birthday for our boys, and that was so special. Very, very
well,
special.
that all sort of came about, like, there's two cool things like with that, because Jack obviously works in hospitals, and
Yeah.
she was working in she's most of her time's been working in kids hospitals, actually. And she, obviously, you're around people that have kids that have kids that are born preemie and stuff, and there's sort of like a bit of a feeling of like you lose some of that experience of like the joy of having your babies. And so she was just like let's just do this, because it's like a thing to say, hey, you've had your babies, like they're here.
I'm so glad you did, because it's true. Like it didn't feel like congratulations, you just had a baby. It was like, this is really scary. Are they going to be okay? This is not.
Totally.
It's like, yeah. So to bring you guys to bring in that joy was really, really special. So thank you. I
Yeah.
still remember it very fondly.
Yeah. Because what, like, for people, like, there was sort of a bit of a providence sort of thing with it as well, is because Archie at the time was going through this phase of the How to Train Your Dragon phase. And like he was really liking these dragons, and his favorite dragon, which he even had like a stuffed toy of, was this two-headed, like it's like this twin kind of dragon. And that the day that, like, before we'd even found out that the boys had been born and that sort of thing, was Archie decided that it was I think it's called Sippleback or something like that is the type of dragon. It was his birthday that day. And so like that was
now,
the cake was like like, oh well, it's the twins are born and it's the Sippleback's birthday. And
yeah,
that
I
was this
remember that now. Yeah.
I mean, providential twin. But no.
Yeah.
Amy, thank you so much for coming on board, and thank you so much for being so open, like, about parts of your journey that are difficult and hard, and hopefully it'll bring some encouragement to some people out there.
Hopefully.
Thanks again. We need to chat soon.
We do. He's too far away.